Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Think Again. This is Mr. D, and today I got a pretty interesting topic. Is gold card good or bad for US economy? We heard in the news that President Trump is looking at issuing a gold card to the investors. So I thought it's a good idea to just explore a little bit of history on investor visa and then how it might help US economy. So first thing, what is Gold Card? Gold Card is kind of a modified version of EB5, which is an investor visa, and that is what we are hearing in the news about it. So let's see some of the history of EB5 visa. So EB5 was introduced by Congress in 1990s, and it has a lot of enforcement issues, and because of that, they added some administrative appeals office, and also investors have to show the proof of funds. That's some of the things they have done in 1990. And in 2000s, they also introduced a cap of 10,000 visas per year, but due to the processing time and the entire uh, due diligence was taking more time, so not many visas were processed. So at that time, Congress introduced a change. Again, they said, let's do regional centers so that you can process the cases faster. In 2019, Congress made an amendment again to uh, have regional centers publish the reports, annual reports, so that they can see who is getting processed and then also what kind of overall statistics around the processing. And they also changed the minimum investment to 1.8 million or 900K, depending on what type of investment it is. And then in 2022, which is the final as of now, is the regulation. So that's where they introduced the Reform and Integrity Act, and also Congress added some visa allocations, especially kind of maybe 32% for a set of investments and 20% for the rural and 10% for high unemployment areas, like that. So they introduced the concept of allocations by certain areas, and they also changed the investment amount. They reduced it a little bit to 1.05 million or 800K. So that's at a high level how it started and then where we are now. Now let's look at who is using and then how many visas are used so far. So let's look at how many visas are issued from 2000. I could not find a good graph before 2000. So let's go with this 2000 to present, which is still close to 24 years. So in these 24 years, we have 135K visas issued. And there are two categories if you see in the graph. One is AOS, which is adjustment of status, and CP is consular processing. So CP is usually where the investor is outside the country and they apply through a consulate. So when you look at the graph, you see the majority of them are going through the CP process. And right now, it looks like, on an average, we got maybe on an average 10,000 visas more, because the way these visas work is if they're not used in this year, they gets rolled into the next year. That's why uh, the USCS is able to issue more visas than 10,000 in a year, because they're rolling from the previous year. Now let's look at which countries are actually taking advantage of this. And if you look, and then I found the graph for 2024, and if you look at the first chart where it says visa applicants country of birth, so China and Vietnam and India, these are the top three countries they are using this process. And if you go further down in the list, Taiwan, Korea, so most of these South Korea, so most of these countries, the heavy users are Asians, and they are coming through the process of EB5. Now let's look at some of the requirements for EB5 visa. So anytime an investor is applying, they need to commit a certain amount of money, and depending on what type of investment they're doing, either it could be 1 million or 800K, and also they need to create at least 10 full-time jobs, and they need to be 10 full-time jobs on an average for 2 years. And they, as an investor, they have a choice. Either they can start their own company, or they can partner with regional service center projects. If they partner with service center projects, usually they don't have much kind of autonomy on how to execute the project. But it sometimes, it also helps the investors being outside. It also gives them, easy start into the investing in the US. Now let's see what are some of the limitations of the EB5. I think a lot of limitations what I could see are with the process part of it, not necessarily the visa itself. Like for example, one of the limitation I see is a capital investment requirement. Yes, it has a decent amount of money for somebody to invest just to move here. So that is the intent of this investor visa. So I don't see that as a true limitation, but it also like separates the people who don't have money to invest. The second one is immigration process and timeline. Now this is where people have it based on the country, based on the consular center. There could be a delays in processing. Sometimes I was seeing in the articles like close to 2 years also people to go through the process, and the potential delays and visa retrogations. Now this is where what happens is, when they're going through all the paperwork, there are obviously delays. And also if you invest and you're not able to maintain 10 jobs, or if you run into losses and then you close the company, so there are like significant delays with reprocessing of those kind of things. And obviously the risk of capital loss, yes, because it's an investor visa. Anytime you are an investor, there's always a risk. But being outside the country, and if you don't invest with the proper advice, and also pick an industry which you are comfortable with, there is a high chance of risk of that. And the regional center versus direct investment risk. So this is where if you pick a regional center, then most of the time what happens is, you are pooling your money into a bigger project, and then you don't have direct control on most of the project outcomes. Whereas if you do direct investment, you do have a control, but there is also a chance of higher risk being in the new country. And then if the investor is not careful enough, their business may go into losses. The compliance and regulatory issues. Now, this is where, like when you get a visa, you need to follow all the process. And then if you run into any of the, paperwork discrepancies, or, if you have any process related issues, then you will be facing, those retrogation with the EB5 visa. Other one is limited control over business operations. I think this can be rolled into other ones we talked about, because obviously you are investing into a regional center, then you don't have much control. And also if you do direct investment, a lot of times you're going through some local owned either law firms or any other kind of a regional manager to help you out. So it has, because of that, it introduces some of the limitations on the control of the operations. And then the last one, due diligence challenge. Now this is where when you apply, you see the immigration department is going to do quite a lot of paperwork reviews with you, and then they need to also verify legitimate source of the funds, and then family history, any kind of um, like illegal business, all those kind of things. There are checks and balances they're going through, and sometimes that can take time and also money to do that. Now I thought, these are some of the limitations, but I just also wanted to see how many other countries have similar kind of a program, and then some of them called them as a golden visa program. So there are 30 plus countries which have a very good golden visa program, and there are a lot of big consulting firms, law firms who are doing this as their bread and butter, finding a rich people a new home or the new country where they want to move. It seems to be a pretty big business. And then I picked up top six from the Europe here. So most of them have investment requirement, and then they have, either they can give you a citizenship or you go through the process of residency and citizenship. Whereas in US, you have a minimum 800K investment and 2 year residency and 7 years to citizenship. So that's what happens. So looking at all this data and then how it has been used so far, I fairly can conclude that the gold card is good for US economy. Why? Because there is a big demand for investors. They're looking to move into a better lifestyle or better countries, and one of them is the US. That's why I feel it is definitely going to be good for the economy. And also there is a lot of demand for these ones. That's why there are 30 plus other countries which are doing this program. uh, but one thing, this visa program, this gold card program, can be set up a little bit different. Maybe since it's a new investor with a high dollar amounts, we could maybe channel them into emerging trends rather than just letting them pick a category of real estate or anything. Let's come up with a list every year of emerging trends, and then in that we can say that okay, we can create a funds, or we can have the investors start those kind of trends. So that way you can also, if there is a new trend starting in any kind of like a e-commerce or maybe AI related, so if there's any new things coming up, we can encourage them to start their business here. And the US gets new technology, new way of thinking, and also it also grow the market and help create the jobs. And then I heard, not 100% sure, but I heard in the speech, President Trump was saying that it should be a donation to the government. I prefer it to be an investment by the investor, and then they manage the investment, rather than if you give funds to government, then again, who is going to manage that? Uh, and then you need that additional creativity, thought process from the investor to be engaged in that process. Otherwise, it is like somebody is buying just an ETF fund. So it's not going to really bring all investor has to give to the system. It won't be coming back into US. So my preference is if you can make it, still keep it as an investment. And I treat this as like when you go to a Disneyland, you have a lightning lane kind of a pass. I see this like a $5 million gold card is similar kind of a thing. And then that way but we need to give back something to the investor, like make it easy for them or make it simple to start. Maybe the duration is smaller, and then if we can do some kind of way to accelerate things for the investor, and they will be willing to go through this 5 million route instead of the older EB5, which is maybe a maximum 1 million. And I also feel there is a need for both kind of cards. I don't see why we need to stop EB5 program. It has a good set of guidelines, and it invests in certain type of industries. Maybe we start a new program, which is a 5 million program, which is a gold card, and then you can also channel this into a different industries or emerging markets or locations. And then that way you have two programs going, and depending on the investor's interest, affordability, and then type of industry they want to be in, then they can channel their funds into the visa. Thank you all. That's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoy the content. Thank you.